Usually I like to start a news video with a smile, but when the WWE fire another load of people after a year of just constantly firing people, I don't really have that many reasons to smile. John Morrison, Isaiah Swerve Scott, Top Dollar, Ashanti the Adonis, Tegan Nox, Drake Maverick again, Shane Thorne and Jackson Riker have all been released in the newest batch of supposed WWE budget cuts. None of these releases have had anything to do with budget cuts. Let's run through everyone and talk about why these releases actually did happen. Just before we get started, remember to follow, like and subscribe on your Tom Colohue channels to learn the latest wrestling news and information that isn't available anywhere else. Let's get started after you've done that. The WWE basically had no plans for John Morrison from day one, and in the absence of The Miz, they had even less interest in working with him. Morrison historically had no interest in a singles run and didn't have enough of a recognised established character to work separately from The Miz in his latest incarnation. The WWE didn't really establish much about John Morrison other than he was The Miz's friend and he made bad jokes. The breakup between The Miz and John Morrison was planned to end with a resounding victory for The Miz and a reinvention for Morrison, but the WWE had no firm plans for what that reinvention would be. As a result, what did we get? John Morrison being super zen. We might as well be reliving Jinder Mahal's vastly unpopular Shanti phase. It was a poison chalice from the start, and probably the biggest problem was that after Frankie Monet was fired, Morrison himself openly did not want to be here. He apparently was very clear backstage with his interest in not really sticking around. The firing was coming, but it kind of helped it along. The loss of Hit Row is probably one of the biggest surprises of the year in terms of the WWE firing people, because it sure seemed like those three were about to get a big push. That said, now that we're seeing things from the other side, there were some pretty clear signs that something was awry. Hit Row's use has been, if you'll forgive the pun, hit or miss. They've been given promo time, but only one match, and the loss of B-Fab caused a clear reaction from the crowds. I wouldn't say the crowds were turning on them because that's not the case, but crowds were turning on the WWE because of them, and this made them a little bit unpopular backstage. However, this is one of those cases where the WWE almost intentionally shot themselves in the foot. Nobody on the SmackDown writers team felt confident writing for Hit Row, and the management team didn't feel confident letting them write for themselves. So nobody was really planning things for them. In fact, nobody really focused on them at all. The problem wasn't Top Dollar, despite reports to the contrary. This was something that the WWE leaked in an effort to make themselves look better, more on that later. The issue was a lack of faith in Swerve to make it to the top. The WWE did see potential in Top Dollar, but reports that he was going to be the star aren't accurate. Swerve was the star in NXT, and WWE management still expected him to be the one to watch, the breakout star. However, they just plain didn't know how to use him. Because of this, he was pushed aside, and to the background, and quickly, people started to lose faith, not just in the WWE, but audiences too. Hit Row as a unit had enormous potential. In fact, they still do, just not in the WWE. Tegan Nox? No plans. We've been talking about this for a few weeks. A lot of people, particularly those drafted on Talking Smack or Raw Talk, had no plans attached to them and were literally just picked up by Raw or SmackDown with the hope of, okay, we'll try something. They didn't try anything. Pitches were made and, as I feel I've said non-stop for months now, pitches were bad. So bad, in fact, that they decided to just fire her instead. Nox and Shotzi were called in together, but they were only called up to fill a spot. Anyone currently in the women's tag division needs to be watching their back. Vince in particular has never had any interest in anyone in that entire division. Drake Maverick? They tried to fire him already, and he ended up with a new and cheaper contract due to fan support. There won't be any fan support helping him now. Once again, there were never any real consistent plans for him. Because he was fired previously, nobody really committed to providing him with a solid storyline, so Maverick drifted his entire time back in the company. I don't like saying it, but to be clear, the WWE didn't want him, and haven't wanted him for a while. It's a surprise he lasted this long before making it onto a CBA list. Shane Thorne? No plans. The writing was on the wall on this one for a while. He was reinvented and reinventive, and to be blunt, they were mostly keeping hold of him with the intent of taking advantage of the Smosh connection. I know that's a really cynical thing to say, but the WWE are quite the cynical company. Finally, Jackson Riker has been fired. There is going to be a lot more news coming out on these releases for a while yet. Most of it is just going to be they were fired because there were no plans. Most of what will come out we've already covered here in the Tom Colohue channels. Keep an ear to the ground and pay attention to how many contradictory reports come through. If you want to know first, follow, like and subscribe to the Tom Colohue channels. Connor says Rhea won't be leaving anytime soon. No, she is definitely a pet project, but she has mentioned on her Twitter that she came close to being fired quite a few times. Sean says, I can see Drake reuniting VC3. I agree. I think that's a very likely scenario as well. And Connor says, Tom, you're starting to sound like a broken record with this no plans thing. Oh, I know. But it's still a thing, isn't it? It's still something that you hear so often. And it's just ridiculous. That they have no plans for so many people. This is what, 70, 75 people? Pardon me. 70, 75 people fired this year? They couldn't come up with something for any of them? You couldn't come up with something on the main roster for Mandy Rose? For Dakota Kai? You couldn't come up with anything. Literally, you couldn't come up with anything that would entice Adam Cole to stay. Nothing. How long have we been waiting for any storyline with Jeff Hardy? How long have we been waiting for something with Shayna Baszler, with Sami Zayn, Liv Morgan? How long have we been waiting for something to sink our teeth into? Even after all these people are fired, you still have nothing? How is that possible? Ugh. Ghost, welcome. Says, and Jackson Riker was released. Okay, moving on. Yep, that's sort of a trademark for me at the minute. I'm kind of going to miss him just so I lose my trademark. Moxie says, the real Drip King is Roman Reigns and his clothes with his shoes. Well, Top Dollar would disagree with that. Captain Buzzy says, what happened with Hit Row was a depressing example of never getting a chance to really show off your skills. On a less depressing note, Drake Maverick made an amazing video post-release. I hope more people watch it. I'm sure they will. There's a lot to pay attention to. Connor says, sounds like they need to hire some better pro wrestling writers. Yep, absolutely they do. But then that's the thing. They hire people who think outside the box, and then they have to fire them because they're not that experienced with wrestling. It's happened before. Go says, no screwing, just smashing. There's a t-shirt. There's a t-shirt right there.